Maria had been cleaning the Hartwell Concert Hall for 15 years. Every single night after the last person left and the big lights went dark, she would push her heavy cart through those grand hallways. Her hands moved automatically now, wiping the shiny marble floors, making the brass rails gleam, emptying trash bins that smelled of expensive perfume and program papers. People walked past her all the time. Musicians in their fancy clothes, staff members rushing to meetings, audience members in their evening wear. But nobody really saw her. Not really. To them, she was just part of the building. Like the red velvet curtains, like the paintings on the walls, just there, always there. But invisible. She was 53 years old now. Her hair had turned gray years ago, and she kept it pulled back tight in a simple bun. Every day she wore the same navy blue uniform with her name tag pinned to the chest. She never wore makeup. Never wore jewelry except for the thin gold wedding band she still couldn't bring herself to take off, even though her husband had been gone for 6 years now. Maria didn't talk much at work. She said good evening to the security guard. She nodded to the stage manager when they passed in the halls. But mostly she stayed quiet. Quiet and invisible. That's how she'd survived all these years in this place that was so beautiful it sometimes hurt to look at. But here's what nobody knew about Maria. Here's the secret she carried with her every single night. She didn't come to work just to clean. She came for the music. Every evening she arrived exactly 1 hour before her shift started. The time clock showed her early arrival, but her supervisor never questioned it. He probably thought she was just a dedicated worker. But that wasn't why she came early. She came early so she could sit in the very back corner of the upper balcony, hidden in the shadows, and listen. Listen to the rehearsals. Listen to the musicians practicing. Listen to the sound checks and the run-throughs and the final dress rehearsals before big performances. She would sit there in the darkness, her cleaning cart parked in a hallway, her uniform blending into the shadows, and she would let the music fill her up like water filling an empty glass. Sometimes she closed her eyes and felt the notes moving through her body. Sometimes she mouthed the words to operas she'd heard so many times she knew them by heart. Sometimes her fingers moved on her lap, pressing invisible keys, following along with the pianists on stage. Nobody ever noticed her up there. Nobody ever knew. This month was special. The concert hall was hosting the International Young Pianists Competition. It was the biggest event of the year. For 3 whole weeks, young pianists from all over the world had been coming through those doors. Kids and teenagers who played so beautifully it made you forget to breathe. Maria had heard them all. The girl from Japan who played so fast her hands looked like they were flying. The boy from Russia whose soft playing could make you cry. The teenager from Brazil who attacked the keys like he was fighting them and somehow made it sound incredible. Every single one of them was so talented, so young, so full of dreams. During those 3 weeks, the building had been alive with sound. Scales going up and down, arpeggios that sounded like water flowing, complicated pieces that twisted and turned and made your heart race. Maria knew every single piece they were playing. She could hum them while she scrubbed the bathroom sinks. She could feel the big, dramatic parts building up in her chest while she mopped the lobby floors. She'd learned to recognize good playing from great playing. She could hear when someone was just going through the motions and when they really felt what they were doing. She could tell when a young pianist was nervous, when they were showing off, when they were truly lost in the music. 15 years of listening had taught her things that most people would never understand. At night, when she finally went home to her tiny apartment, she could still hear the music in her head. She'd lie in bed in the darkness and the melodies would play over and over. Sometimes they helped her sleep. Sometimes they kept her awake, filling her with an ache she couldn't name. An ache for something she'd lost a long time ago. Something she tried not to think about. Her apartment was small and plain. Just a bedroom, a bathroom, and a kitchen that was barely big enough to turn around in. The furniture was old, bought secondhand from charity shops. The walls were white and empty except for one photograph. Just one. A faded picture of a young girl sitting at a piano, her hands on the keys, her face bright with joy. Maria walked past that picture every single day, but she never looked at it. Not if she could help it. The other cleaners at the concert hall were nice enough. They ate lunch together in the basement break room, sharing food and stories about their families. But Maria usually ate alone. Not because they weren't kind to her. They were. But because she had nothing to share. No husband anymore. No children. No family nearby, just work and home and the music she stole from the shadows. Sometimes the younger cleaners would complain about the job, about the long hours, about the aching backs and tired feet, about the way people looked right through them like they didn't exist. Maria never complained. She was grateful for this job, grateful to be in this building, grateful to be near the music even if she was only near it. Even if she could never touch it. The competition finals were coming up in just 3 days. The whole building buzzed with excitement. Important people from music schools and concert halls all over the world were arriving. Photographers were setting up their equipment. The kitchen staff was preparing fancy food for the after-party. Everyone was talking about who would win, who was the favorite, who would surprise everyone. Maria listened to all the gossip as she worked. She had her own opinions about who played the best, but she kept them to herself. Who would care what a cleaner thought about piano playing? She was just there to make sure everything was spotless, to make sure the bathrooms were clean and the floors were shiny and the trash was emptied. That was her job. That was all anyone expected from her. But late at night, when she was alone in those great big hallways with her cart and her mop and her spray bottles, Maria would sometimes stop and look at the concert hall doors. Behind those doors was the stage, the lights, the beautiful piano that cost more money than she'd make in 10 years. Sometimes she imagined walking through those doors, imagined sitting at that piano, imagined her fingers on those keys, but then she'd shake her head and get back to work. Those were foolish thoughts, dangerous thoughts. She was 53 years old. She was a cleaner. That life, that dream, that belonged to someone else, to a girl who didn't exist anymore, to a past that was buried so deep she'd almost convinced herself it had never been real at all. Almost. But not quite. Maria wasn't always invisible. There was a time when people noticed her, when they stopped what they were doing just to listen to her, when they said her name with respect and wonder. But that was 40 years ago. In a different country, in a life that felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. She grew up in a small fishing town on the coast of Portugal, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where the smell of salt and fish filled the air every morning, where the church bells rang out across the harbor at sunset. Her father was a fisherman. His hands were rough and scarred from years of pulling nets and handling ropes. Her mother took in sewing work, sitting by the window for hours, her needle moving in and out, in and out. They weren't rich. Not even close. Most nights, dinner was sardines and bread and whatever vegetables her mother could grow in their tiny garden. Maria's clothes were hand-me-downs from cousins. Her shoes had holes in them that her father patched with pieces of old tire rubber, but they were happy. At least she remembered being happy. When Maria was 7 years old, something happened that changed everything. The church got a new piano. Not a fancy one. Actually, it was pretty beaten up. Someone from Lisbon had donated it because they were buying a newer model. But to the little fishing town, it was like a treasure had arrived. The priest asked if anyone in town knew how to play it. An old woman named Senora Costa raised her hand. She'd studied piano as a girl before the war. Before life got hard and dreams got put away, she agreed to play for Sunday Mass and to give lessons to any child whose family could afford it. Maria's father heard about the lessons. He came home that evening and looked at his daughter. She was sitting at the kitchen table, drawing pictures with a stub of pencil, and he said something that Maria would remember for the rest of her life. He said, "Music is the one thing no one can ever take from you. Not poverty, not hardship, not anything. Once it's inside you, it's yours forever." The lessons cost money they didn't have, but her father started working extra hours. He went out earlier in the morning, came home later at night. He stopped buying tobacco for his pipe, stopped going to the cafe with the other fishermen on Sundays. Every coin he saved went into a jar on the kitchen shelf. And when he had enough, he took Maria to Senora Costa's house. Maria still remembered that first lesson. The way the piano keys felt under her small fingers, cold and smooth. The way the sound seemed to come from somewhere deep inside the instrument, like it had been sleeping there waiting for someone to wake it up. Senora Costa showed her where to put her hands, taught her the names of the notes, and Maria learned fast. Really fast. By the time she was 10 years old, people were talking about her all over town. The fisherman's daughter who played like an angel. They asked her to play at weddings, at funerals, at the festival for the patron saint. She played in the church every Sunday, and people who never went to Mass started showing up just to hear her. Her father would sit in the back row, his weathered face shining with pride. Her mother would cry quietly, dabbing her eyes with her handkerchief. And Maria would play, her small hands moving across the keys, her whole body swaying with the music. She wasn't just good. She was extraordinary. Everyone said so. When Maria turned 13, Senora Costa did something unusual. She invited a friend from Lisbon to come hear Maria play. This friend was a professor at the Lisbon Conservatory, one of the best music schools in the country. He made the long trip to their little town, probably expecting to hear a talented child. What he heard instead made him cancel his return trip and stay for 3 more days. Before he left, he offered Maria a full scholarship. Room and board included. She could study with the best teachers in Portugal. She could have a future in music. A real future. The kind of future that girls from fishing towns weren't supposed to have. Maria's parents cried when they heard the news. Happy tears. Scared tears. Her father held her face in his rough hands and said, "You were meant for bigger things than this town. Go. Make us proud." Her mother packed her only good dress and 3 other outfits in a small suitcase. And just like that, at 13 years old, Maria moved to Lisbon. The conservatory was like nothing she'd ever seen. Marble hallways, practice rooms with perfect acoustics, pianos that were actually in tune, students from wealthy families who had been playing since they were 3 years old. At first, she felt completely out of place. Her accent was too strong. Her clothes were too plain. She didn't know how to act around rich people, but when she sat at the piano, none of that mattered. Her playing silenced everyone. Her teachers called her a natural, a prodigy. They said she had something that couldn't be taught, something that came from the soul. Within months, she was performing in recitals. Within a year, she was winning competitions. She went home to visit whenever she could. Her father would ask her to play for him, and he'd sit in their tiny living room with his eyes closed, listening. Sometimes he fell asleep in his chair, but she didn't mind. She knew the music reached him even in his dreams. Then came the storm. Maria was 16 years old. She'd been at the conservatory for 3 years. She was preparing for a big competition in Spain. Her teachers said she could win it, said it could launch her career internationally. She was practicing 8 hours a day, her fingers flying across the keys, her whole future bright and shining ahead of her. The news came on a Tuesday morning. Her father's boat had gone out before dawn. A freak storm had blown in from the Atlantic. Fast and violent. 3 boats went down. Her father's was one of them. They found pieces of the boat washed up on the shore, but they never found her father. Maria took the train home for the funeral. The whole town came. Everyone cried. Everyone told her how sorry they were. And then she went back to Lisbon, numb and hollow, to finish the semester. But something had broken inside her. The music that used to flow so easily now felt forced. The joy was gone. Everything felt gray. Then her mother got sick. Grief, the doctor said. Sometimes grief makes the body sick. She got weaker and weaker. Maria had 2 younger brothers, 12 and 14. Someone had to take care of them. Someone had to work. Someone had to keep the family together. Maria was the oldest. It had to be her. She left the conservatory, packed up her things, said goodbye to her teachers who begged her to stay, who said they'd find a way to help. But there was no way to help. Her family needed her. So she went home to the fishing town and got a job at the fish processing plant. Her hands that used to create beautiful music now gutted fish for 8 hours a day. The smell never really came off, no matter how much she scrubbed. Her mother died 2 years later. By then, Maria was 18. Her brothers were old enough to work on the boats. And Maria met a man named João. He worked at the plant too. He was kind, quiet. He didn't know anything about music, but he was steady, safe. When he asked her to marry him, she said yes. Not because she loved him madly, but because she was tired. So tired of struggling, so tired of responsibility. They got married in the same church where she used to play piano. Someone else played for the wedding. Maria sat in the pew and listened, and it felt like watching someone else's life. The piano was still there. She never touched it again. Years passed. Hard years. Poor years. They barely scraped by. Then João got it in his head that they should move to England. Better opportunities, he said. Better money. So they packed up everything they owned, which wasn't much, and moved to London. Lived in a cramped apartment in a rough neighborhood. Worked jobs that paid under the table. João died when he was 47. Heart attack at the factory where he worked. Just collapsed one day and never got back up. They'd been married for 19 years. Not a great marriage. Not a terrible one. Just a life. And then he was gone, and Maria was alone in a foreign country, middle-aged and tired, with nothing but memories of a girl who used to play piano in a fishing town in Portugal. She needed work. She needed to pay rent. She saw an advertisement for a cleaning position at a concert hall. The pay was decent. The hours were steady, and when she walked into that building for the interview, she felt something she hadn't felt in decades. She felt the music in the air, felt it calling to her like an old friend she'd abandoned. She got the job, and for 15 years she stayed, cleaning, listening, remembering, trying to forget. It was Thursday evening. 3 days before the competition finals, Maria was working her way through the main concert hall, row by row, seat by seat. Her back ached like it always did by this time of night. Her knees hurt when she bent down to pick up the programs people had dropped on the floor. But she kept working. This was what she did. This was who she was now. The hall was supposed to be empty. Most of the pianists had finished practicing for the day. The staff had gone home. It was just Maria in the quiet building and the smell of lemon cleaning solution. She liked it this way. Peaceful. Calm. Just her and her thoughts and the work that kept her hands busy. But then she heard voices, angry voices, coming from the stage. Maria looked up from the seat she was wiping down. 2 people were on the stage and they were arguing. She recognized them both. One was Thomas Chen, the 17-year-old pianist from Canada. He was the favorite to win the whole competition. Everyone said so. The judges loved him. The audiences loved him. He played with this incredible technical skill that made you forget he was just a teenager. The other person was his teacher, an older man with glasses who always looked stressed. Right now he looked more than stressed. He looked furious. "You're being ridiculous," the teacher was saying, his voice echoing through the empty hall. "You've worked for years for this opportunity. Years. And you want to throw it away because of what? Nerves, pressure? That's part of being a professional." Thomas shook his head. His face was red. His hands were shaking. "You don't understand. I can't do this anymore. I can't breathe. Every time I sit at that piano, I feel like I'm going to pass out. I'm done. I'm finished. If you walk away now, you're giving up everything. Everything we've worked for." "No," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "What you've worked for. This was never about me. It was always about you. Your reputation. Your legacy. I'm just the kid who plays the notes you tell me to play." The teacher started to say something else, but Thomas wasn't listening anymore. He grabbed his bag from beside the piano and walked off the stage. Walked up the aisle. Walked right past Maria like she wasn't even there. The teacher shouted after him, but Thomas just kept walking until he disappeared through the back doors. The teacher stood there for a moment, then swore under his breath and stormed off in the other direction. And just like that, the hall was empty again. Empty except for Maria and her cleaning cart and the grand piano sitting alone on the stage under the bright lights. Maria should have kept working. She knew that. She should have pushed her cart to the next row and kept her head down and minded her own business. That's what she'd done for 15 years. Stay invisible. Stay quiet. Don't get involved. But her feet started moving. She didn't even decide to move. Her body just did it on its own, like it was being pulled by something she couldn't see. She walked down the aisle toward the stage. Her heart was pounding. Her mouth was dry. She climbed the steps, her practical cleaning shoes making soft sounds on the wooden floor. The piano was right there, so close the lid was open. The bench was pulled out exactly the right distance from the keys. The stage lights were warm on her face. She could see dust particles floating in the beams of light. Maria looked out at the empty hall. All those red velvet seats. The balconies rising up on either side. The ornate ceiling with its painted designs. She'd cleaned every inch of this place, but she'd never seen it from this angle before. From the stage. From where the musicians sat. Her hands were shaking as she sat down on the bench. It felt strange. Wrong somehow, like she was trespassing in a place she didn't belong. But also like coming home after being lost for a very long time. She adjusted the bench slightly. Her hands hovered over the keys. They looked different up close, whiter, more real. She could see tiny scratches and marks from years of playing, from thousands of hands touching them, creating music. For a long moment she just sat there, Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might burst. Part of her was screaming to get up, to go back to her cleaning cart, to pretend this never happened. But another part of her, a part she'd buried deep down for 40 years, was wide awake now, and it was hungry. Maria took a breath. Then she let her fingers rest on the keys. The ivory was cool and smooth under her fingertips. She closed her eyes, and she began to play. The piece she chose was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. She'd learned it when she was 14 at the conservatory. She'd played it at her first major recital. She'd played it so many times back then that it became part of her bones and blood and breath, but she hadn't touched a piano in 40 years. The first notes came out clumsy. Wrong. Her fingers didn't remember where to go. They stumbled and slipped. The rhythm was off. The dynamics were all wrong. For a terrible moment, Maria thought she'd forgotten everything, that it was all gone. Lost forever, but then something shifted. Her fingers found their way. Muscle memory that she didn't even know she still had began to wake up. The notes started to flow, slowly at first, hesitantly, like someone learning to walk again after being bedridden for years. And then something incredible happened. The music came alive. Maria stopped thinking, stopped worrying. She just played, and as she played, 40 years of buried emotion came pouring out through her fingertips. All the grief she'd never properly cried out, all the loss she'd never fully acknowledged, all the dreams she'd given up, all the loneliness of her life in London, all the love she'd felt for her father, for her mother, for Joan, for the girl she used to be. The music was raw. It was imperfect. It wasn't the polished technical perfection of the competition pianists. But it was real. It was honest. It was the sound of a human heart breaking and mending and breaking again all at the same time. She played the gentle opening, her touch soft and tender. She played the middle section where the melody soars, her whole body swaying with the emotion. She played the return of the opening theme, now colored with everything that had come before. The concert hall's acoustics caught every note and made them bigger, richer, filling the entire space with sound. Maria had forgotten what this felt like. This connection, this sense of speaking a language that went deeper than words. She'd forgotten that music could do this. Could make you feel like you were flying and drowning at the same time. Could make 40 years disappear in an instant. She played the final delicate phrases, the last soft notes that fade away like a whisper. Her hands lifted from the keys. The sound hung in the air for a moment, then faded into silence. Maria opened her eyes. Her face was wet. She was crying and hadn't even realized it. Her whole body was shaking. She felt exhausted and alive and terrified and free all at the same time. And then she heard it, clapping. The sound made her jump. She spun around on the bench, her heart lurching. Someone was applauding. No, not someone. Multiple people. She squinted out into the darkness beyond the stage lights, and as her eyes adjusted, she could see them. People, standing in the aisles, sitting in the seats, up in the balconies, at least 30 people, maybe more, all of them clapping. And as she looked closer, she saw that many of them were crying too. Tears streaming down their faces, hands pressed to their chests. How long had they been there? How had she not noticed them? She'd been so lost in the music that the whole world could have ended and she wouldn't have known. Maria stood up quickly, almost knocking over the bench, her face flushed hot with embarrassment. She recognized some of the faces now. The artistic director, the stage manager, musicians from the orchestra, staff members she'd worked with for years. They'd all heard her, seen her, a cleaner sitting at the concert grand piano like she had any right to be there. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "I shouldn't have. I didn't mean to. I'll get back to work right now." She started to hurry toward the stage steps, her head down, wanting nothing more than to disappear, to become invisible again, to pretend this never happened. But then a voice rang out, clear and strong, an older man's voice with authority in it. "Please wait." Maria froze. She looked up and saw an elderly man walking down the center aisle. He moved slowly, with dignity, using a cane. As he got closer and climbed the stage steps, Maria's stomach dropped. She recognized him. James Hartford, the founder of the concert hall. A legendary pianist himself. She'd cleaned his office 1,000 times, had seen his photographs on the walls, awards, honors, a whole lifetime of achievement, and she'd just played his piano without permission. in his concert hall. While she was supposed to be working, the old man reached the stage and looked at her. His eyes were kind but curious. Up close she could see he'd been crying too. "What is your name?" he asked gently. Maria's throat was so tight she could barely speak. "Maria Santos, sir. I clean here. I'm very sorry for using the piano. It won't happen again." The old man tilted his head slightly. "How long have you played?" That simple question broke something open inside her, and before she could stop herself, the whole story came tumbling out. Maria told him everything. Standing there on that stage under the bright lights with all those people watching from the darkness, she told James Hartford her whole story. The words just poured out of her like water from a broken dam. She told him about the fishing town in Portugal, about her father who saved every coin so she could have piano lessons, about Senora Costa and the old church piano, about winning the scholarship to the conservatory in Lisbon, about being 13 years old and feeling like the whole world was opening up in front of her. She told him about the storm that took her father, about her mother getting sick from grief, about leaving the conservatory to work at the fish processing plant, about her 2 younger brothers who needed someone to take care of them, about marrying João and moving to London, chasing a dream of a better life that never quite came true. She told him about João's heart attack, about being alone in a foreign country at 47 years old with nothing but memories and bills to pay, about seeing the advertisement for a cleaning job at this concert hall, about taking the job not just because she needed the money, but because she needed to be near music again, even if she could never play it, even if she could only listen from the shadows. 15 years, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. 15 years I've been listening, learning every piece, every note, sitting up in that back corner of the balcony where nobody can see me. I never meant to touch the piano. I know I shouldn't have. But tonight I couldn't help it. James Hartford listened to every single word. He didn't interrupt, didn't check his watch, didn't look impatient or bored. He just listened with his full attention, the way you listen to something important, something that matters. When Maria finished talking, there was silence. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Her whole body felt exhausted, like she'd run a marathon. She'd never told anyone that story before. Not the whole thing. Not all at once like that. James Hartford looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned and looked out at the people gathered in the hall. He gestured to someone, and a woman came down the aisle. Maria recognized her too. Julia Mendes. She was one of the head judges for the competition, a famous pianist and teacher herself. Julia climbed the stage steps and stood next to James Hartford. Something passed between them. A look, an understanding. The kind of silent conversation that people who've known each other for years can have without saying a word. Finally, James Hartford turned back to Maria. "Tell me something," he said. "What do you think is the purpose of this competition? Why do we have it every year?" Maria didn't know what to say. It felt like a test. Like there was a right answer and a wrong answer, and she was going to pick the wrong one. "To find the best pianist?" she said uncertainly. James Hartford shook his head slowly. "No, not quite. Technical skill, we can measure. We can judge who plays the fastest, who makes the fewest mistakes, who has memorized the most difficult pieces. But that's not what we're really looking for." He paused and looked out at the empty seats. "We're looking for musicians who can move people, who understand that music isn't just about hitting the right notes at the right time. It's a language. The language of the human heart. It's about communicating something that can't be communicated any other way." He turned back to Maria. "What I heard tonight, what we all heard, that was more genuine than anything I've heard in this hall in years, maybe decades. You weren't trying to impress anyone. You weren't competing for anything. You were just being honest, and that honesty came through in every single note." Maria felt her eyes filling with tears again. She didn't know what to say, didn't know what he wanted from her. Julia Mendez stepped forward. "How much time would you need to prepare for a performance?" she asked. "If we gave you access to a practice room, if we gave you time to get ready." Maria stared at her. "I don't understand." "The finals concert is in 3 days," Julia said. "Saturday night sold out. People coming from all over the world. What if you performed?" "Performed?" Maria felt like she couldn't breathe. "But I'm not. I can't, I'm just a cleaner. I haven't played in 40 years. Did you not hear that part?" My fingers barely remembered what to do. I made mistakes. My technique is terrible. Your technique is rusty, James Hartford said. That's different from terrible. And yes, you made mistakes. But you also made us feel something. Everyone in this room felt it. That's what matters. A man stepped out of the shadows. Maria gasped. It was Thomas Chen, the teenager who'd stormed out earlier. He'd come back. He'd been listening the whole time. Thomas walked up to the stage, his eyes red from crying. I've been playing piano since I was 4 years old, he said quietly. I practice 6 hours a day, sometimes 8. I've won every competition I've entered since I was 9. I play everything perfectly. Every note. Every rhythm. Every dynamic marking exactly as written. He looked at Maria. But I've never played like that. I've never felt like that. When I sit at the piano, all I think about is whether I'm good enough, whether I'm going to win, whether I'm going to make my teacher proud or disappoint him. I forgot why I started playing in the first place, he wiped his eyes. You reminded me just now. You reminded all of us. More people started coming forward. The stage manager, musicians from the orchestra, other competition judges. They all said the same thing. They'd heard thousands of pianists. But what Maria played was different. It was real. Maria shook her head. You don't understand. I can't perform. I don't have anything to wear. I don't know what I'd even play. I'd need to practice so much and I still work. I have shifts. I can't just... We'll figure out the details, Julia Mendez said firmly. The question isn't about logistics. The question is, do you want to? Do you want to? Such a simple question, but it felt enormous, terrifying. Maria had spent 40 years not wanting things, not hoping for things, not dreaming about things. It was safer that way. Easier. You couldn't be disappointed if you didn't hope for anything in the first place. But standing there on that stage, with all those people looking at her, with the piano behind her, still warm from her touch, with the memory of how it felt to play again, to let the music move through her after all these years, how could she say no? I'm scared, she whispered. Of course you are, James Hartford said gently. Anything worth doing is scary. But let me ask you something else. If you say no right now, if you walk away from this stage and go back to your cleaning cart and never touch a piano again, how will you feel? Maria closed her eyes. She knew exactly how she'd feel. She'd feel like she'd failed that 13-year-old girl from the fishing town, the girl who played at weddings and festivals and church services, the girl who got a scholarship to the conservatory, the girl whose father saved every coin to give her a chance at something bigger. She'd been running from that girl for 40 years, hiding from her, pretending she didn't exist anymore. But she did exist. She was still there, buried deep inside, still dreaming, still hoping, still wanting to play. Okay, Maria said so quietly she wasn't sure anyone heard her. What was that? Julia Mendez asked, leaning closer. Maria opened her eyes. She stood up straighter. She looked at James Hartford and Julia Mendez and Thomas Chen and all the people watching from the audience, and she said it louder, clear and strong. Okay, yes, I'll do it. The concert hall erupted in applause. People cheered. Some of them were crying again. James Hartford smiled, his whole face lighting up. Julia Mendez grabbed Maria's hands and squeezed them. 3 days, Julia said. We have 3 days to get you ready. Starting tomorrow morning, you'll have full access to our best practice rooms. We'll arrange your work schedule. We'll find you something appropriate to wear. We'll help you choose your program, whatever you need. But, Maria said, panic rising in her chest, I don't know if I can. What if I freeze up? What if I forget everything? What if I disappoint everyone? Thomas Chen stepped closer. You won't, he said. You know why? Because you're not playing for us. You're not playing to win anything or prove anything. You're playing for yourself, for that girl you used to be, and for everyone like me who forgot why we started making music in the first place. James Hartford nodded. He's right. We're not asking you to be perfect. We're asking you to be honest. To be yourself. That's all. Just do what you did tonight. Play from your heart. Maria looked down at her hands. Her cleaning woman's hands, rough from years of scrubbing and mopping and polishing. Not the smooth hands of a concert pianist. Not young hands anymore, but they were her hands. And tonight they'd made music. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all she needed. 3 days, she said, more to herself than to anyone else. Okay, 3 days. The people in the concert hall started to disperse, talking excitedly among themselves. Several came up to shake Maria's hand or hug her or tell her how moved they were. She felt overwhelmed and grateful and terrified all at the same time. Finally, when most people had left, Maria looked at her cleaning cart still sitting in the aisle where she'd left it. Her mop, her spray bottles, her navy blue uniform, her old life waiting for her. Julia Mendez followed her gaze. "Don't worry about that tonight," she said. "Go home, get some rest. Tomorrow everything changes. Everything changes." Maria thought about those words all the way home on the night bus. Thought about them as she climbed the stairs to her tiny apartment. Thought about them as she lay in bed, too excited and too scared to sleep. She looked at the old photograph on her wall, the young girl at the piano. For the first time in years, she really looked at it. And the girl in the photograph seemed to look back at her, smiling, proud, ready. Tomorrow, everything would change. The next 3 days passed in a blur. Maria barely slept, barely ate. Every waking moment was filled with music. Friday morning, she showed up at the concert hall at 8 o'clock. Not to clean, to practice. It felt strange walking through those familiar doors knowing she wasn't there to work. The security guard did a double take when she walked past him toward the practice rooms instead of the cleaning supply closet. Julia Mendez was already there waiting for her. She led Maria to one of the private practice rooms, a beautiful space with excellent acoustics and a gorgeous grand piano. Maria had cleaned this room hundreds of times, had emptied the trash and wiped down the mirrors and vacuumed the carpet. But she'd never been allowed to touch the piano. Now it was hers, for 3 whole days. "Take your time," Julia said. "Get comfortable. Remember what it feels like. I'll be back in an hour to hear what you're thinking of playing." When the door closed and Maria was alone with the piano, she felt that same fear from the night before, that same voice in her head saying she didn't belong here, that she was fooling herself, that she was going to fail and embarrass everyone who believed in her. But then she sat down at the bench, put her hands on the keys, and started to play. Her fingers were stiff at first, clumsy. The notes came out uneven and hesitant. But she kept going. She played scales, arpeggios, technical exercises she remembered from 40 years ago. Her fingers protested. Her back ached from sitting in a position she wasn't used to anymore. But slowly, muscle memory started to return. By the time Julia came back, Maria had chosen 3 pieces. The Chopin nocturne she'd played the night before, a traditional Portuguese fado that she'd arranged herself years ago, back when she still dreamed of being a composer, and a third piece that she'd been hearing in her head for 15 years, a melody that came to her while she cleaned, while she listened from the shadows, a piece she'd composed in her mind but never written down or played. She called it The Invisible Hours. Julia listened to her play all 3 pieces. When Maria finished, Julia was quiet for a long moment. "The Chopin is beautiful," she finally said. "But those other 2 pieces, Maria, those are special. That's you. That's your voice. Don't hide behind other people's music. Let people hear who you are." They worked together for hours. Julia gave her suggestions about phrasing, about dynamics, about how to bring out certain melodies. But she never tried to change what Maria was doing. Never tried to make her sound like everyone else. Maria practiced until her fingers hurt. Then she practiced more. She went home that night and her neighbor knocked on her door, an older woman who'd lived next door for years but had never heard music coming from Maria's apartment. "I didn't know you played," the neighbor said, her eyes wide. "I used to," Maria said, "a long time ago." "Well, it's beautiful. Please don't stop." Saturday morning, Maria woke up before dawn. The performance was that night. In 12 hours, she would walk onto that stage in front of hundreds of people. Important people, critics, musicians, journalists. The thought made her feel sick, but she got up, got dressed, went back to the concert hall, practiced for 6 more hours. Julia brought her lunch, made her take breaks, reminded her to breathe. In the afternoon, they had to stop practicing so the competition finalists could do their final rehearsals. Maria sat in the audience and watched the young pianists play. They were incredible, so talented, so polished. Their fingers flew across the keys without hesitation. They played the most difficult pieces in the repertoire like they were easy. Watching them, Maria felt the doubt creeping back in. What was she thinking? She couldn't compete with this. She was 53 years old with rusty technique and 40 years of not playing. She was going to make a fool of herself. Thomas Chen sat down next to her. He'd been watching her face. "You're comparing yourself to them," he said quietly. Maria nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Don't," Thomas said. "They're playing to win a competition. You're playing to share your story. That's completely different. Nobody expects you to play like an 18-year-old competition finalist. They want to hear you. The real you. What if the real me isn't good enough?" Thomas smiled. "The real you made me remember why I love music. The real you made my teacher cry, and I've never seen him cry. The real you is more than good enough." At 6 o'clock, Julia took Maria to a dressing room. Someone from the costume department had found a dress for her. It was simple but elegant. Deep blue, the color of the ocean near her hometown in Portugal. When Maria put it on and looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like a pianist. Like a musician, not like a cleaner. Julia helped her with her hair, showed her how to apply a little makeup. "Not too much," Julia said. "You don't need it. You're beautiful as you are." At 7:30, the concert hall started to fill with people. Maria peeked out from backstage and felt her stomach drop. Every single seat was taken. People were standing in the back. The balconies were packed. She'd never seen the hall this full. "Word got out," Julia said, coming up beside her. "Someone posted a video from Thursday night online. It's been shared thousands of times. People want to see you." "That makes it worse," Maria said, her voice shaking. "Or better," Julia said. "They're not here to judge you. They're here to support you. There's a difference." The competition finalists played first. One by one, they walked onto that stage and performed brilliantly. The audience applauded politely after each one. Professional applause. Respectful but measured. Then it was Maria's turn. James Hartford himself walked onto the stage to introduce her. He told the audience about finding her playing alone on Thursday night. About her story. About what music meant to her. By the time he finished, you could have heard a pin drop in that hall. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "Maria Santos." Maria walked onto the stage. Her legs felt like they might give out. The lights were so bright she couldn't see the audience, which was maybe a blessing. She could hear them, though. Hundreds of people silent and waiting. She sat down at the piano, adjusted the bench. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together for a moment. She looked out into the bright lights and thought about her father. About how he used to sit in the back of the church and listen to her play. About how he'd said that music was something no one could ever take from her. She thought about her mother, about Senora Costa, about the girl she used to be, about all the years she'd spent being invisible. And she thought about what Thomas had said, that she wasn't playing to win anything. She was playing to share her story. Maria took a deep breath, put her hands on the keys, and began to play. She started with the Chopin Nocturne, the piece that had opened this door. But this time, she played it better than she had on Thursday night. More confident, more sure. She let herself feel every note, every phrase, every moment of beauty in that piece. The audience was completely silent, not the polite silence of people waiting for something to end, but the deep silence of people who are truly listening, truly present. When the nocturne ended, there was a pause. Then applause. Real applause. Not polite, not measured, genuine. Maria moved on to the Portuguese Fado. This was the riskiest choice. It wasn't a famous piece. Nobody in the audience would have heard it before, but it was hers. It was from her heart, from her homeland, from the girl who used to play in a little fishing town by the sea. She sang it in her mind as she played. The words she remembered from childhood, words about longing and loss and hope and home. Her fingers brought out the melody with all the emotion she felt, all the homesickness for a place she could never return to, all the love for people who were gone. When it ended, the silence was even deeper, and then someone in the audience sobbed, just once. But in that quiet hall, everyone heard it. The final piece was The Invisible Hours. The music she'd composed in her head over 15 years of cleaning and listening and being unseen. It started quietly, almost timidly, like someone afraid to speak up. But it grew, it built. It became stronger and more confident. It told the story of a woman who lost everything and survived, who kept going even when it was hard, who never completely gave up on her dreams even when they seemed impossible. The music swelled and climbed and reached for something beautiful. And then at the very end, it came back to where it started, Quiet, gentle, but changed. Transformed by everything that had come before. When the last note faded away, Maria sat very still, her hands resting on the keys, her eyes closed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the audience exploded. People were on their feet, cheering, crying, applauding so loudly it sounded like thunder. Maria opened her eyes and stood up, and the sound got even louder. She looked out into the audience and saw James Hartford standing in the front row with tears streaming down his face. Julia Mendez was crying too, and Thomas Chen was in the wings, clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. Maria took a bow, and then another, and another. The applause went on and on. People were throwing flowers onto the stage. Someone shouted, "Brava!" Others joined in. The noise was overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying and perfect. Finally, when the applause began to quiet down, Maria walked off the stage. But the audience wouldn't let her go. They kept clapping, kept calling for her. Julia practically pushed her back out for another bow. Backstage, people surrounded her. Musicians she'd admired for years wanted to shake her hand. Journalists wanted to interview her. The competition finalists, these incredible young pianists, came to hug her and tell her how much her playing had moved them. Later that night, after the crowds had dispersed and the concert hall had emptied, Maria walked back into the main hall one last time. She stood on the stage alone, looking out at the empty seats. Her cleaning cart was gone. Someone else would be doing that job now. She wasn't a cleaner anymore, she was a pianist. Again. Finally, James Hartford found her there. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Maria smiled. "I'm thinking about my father. How I wish he could have seen this." "I think he did," James Hartford said. "Somehow, I think he knows." The video of Maria's performance went viral the next day. Millions of people watched it. She was invited to give concerts, to record an album, to teach masterclasses. Newspapers wrote stories about her. Television shows wanted to interview her. The world wanted to hear more. But the thing Maria treasured most wasn't the fame or the opportunities or the attention. It was the message she received a week later from a woman in Brazil. The woman wrote, "I'm 62 years old. I gave up painting 40 years ago because life got in the way. I watched your video and I cried. Then I went out and bought paints. It's never too late. Thank you for showing me that." Maria framed that message and hung it on her wall next to the old photograph of the young girl at the piano, because that was what it was all about. Not just her story, but everyone's story. Everyone who had given up on their dreams. Everyone who felt invisible. Everyone who thought it was too late. It's never too late. That's what Maria learned. That's what she wanted the world to know. The music had been inside her all along. She'd just forgotten how to let it out. And once she remembered, once she found the courage to play again, everything changed. She was no longer invisible. She never had been. She just hadn't seen herself clearly. Now she did, and so did the world.